Hello, everyone. I was supposed to post this on Friday and basically ran out of time, so I'll post it today. It's kind of not entirely a Friday Functions video, and in essence, this is just a video about kind of getting started with Power Apps with some tips that I want to share from my own like work habits, right? And so I decided to put this in the scope of survival kits. So, one of the things you don't know about me yet, but I'll go ahead and share, is I love survival kits. So, I have a everyday carry, which we call an EDC, which basically is in your purse or in your work bag every day. I have an in car or in vehicle emergency kit, which includes, a simple first aid kit and some other essentials if you got stuck in your car for a day, or if you somehow got stuck in a situation where you were in a strange city where you didn't expect to have to stay, but you have to stay for some reason. So I have that. And then I have like my bug out kit, which is in my house or my garage. And this is like lights out for 3 days in Washington because of wind or something. And so these little survival kits are my way of overcoming paranoia, but also it's like a way of feeling secure. And so I got the idea the other day, when it comes to survival kits, there is such a thing as my own little survival kit for Power Apps. Like I could call it an EDC for Power Apps because this kit goes with me everywhere I go, whether I'm using a computer or a laptop or an iPad or my phone. No matter what device I'm using, I can get to this EDC. So I could call it an everyday carry. So I wanted to kind of share with you what are some of the things in my everyday carry kit for Power Apps. And then you can share in the links in the comments on the community. I'll post this in the community as well as to what your EDC looks like for Power Apps. And feel free to post a video with hashtag PowerApps EDC if you want to share your own like successful carries that keep you productive in Power Apps. So a successful EDC is going to keep you productive and also enable you to enable others, right? So let me kind of break that down. For those of you who know about these different survival kits, you already know this. But for those of you who don't, I would like to just take a minute and go over this. Again, I'm only going to talk about the EDC. I'm not going to get into the vehicle, the bug out, or anything like that. All right. So for my survival kits, and this is like a standard in the world, not just me, there's 5 C's that you need to think about when you're preparing your EDCs. Container, cutting tool, cordage, combustion, and cover. All right, so why a container? A container helps you to carry things so that they stay dry and hygienically safe to use. A cutting tool helps you defend yourself, but also break down and to process things. Cordage is great for securing, fixing, and moving things, even yourself. Combustion opens up opportunities to cook food, keep insects away. Did you know that if you burn pine needles, that actually repels like mosquitoes and stuff? Anyway, that's the side point. It also helps you to give signals on where you are and what your status is. And then cover protects you from the risk of impacts from weather and animal life. Sometimes cover is a car or a tent. Sometimes cover is, just a pouch, a poncho that you might wear. So these are the 5 C's for EDCs. And so if you ever want to go and make your first EDC, these are the things you want to think about. Containers. It could be a waterproof bag. It could be a cup that seals. It could be any kind of thing. Cutting tools, knives of all different shapes, size, and colors. Cordages, you got your faithful, I think it's a 550 or 1100 cordage. It's kind of a thickness thing. Combustion, way to start fires. Remember that matches are very fragile in outside because they get wet and then they're not useful. And then cover, just making sure you have like some way to cover yourself. Usually an EDC might not contain a cover because, a cover is usually bigger, but you can fold up, for instance, a poncho and put it in a small EDC kit. So what does this have to do with PowerApps? Okay, my PowerApps EDC formula is D's instead of C's. So if you got your 5 C's down, that's good. But I'm going to cover the 5 D's for the PowerApps EDC. And each D, I'm going to show you how it compares to the actual C equivalent for survival. So I have data source, demos, distribution groups, decks, and documentation, okay? And believe me, I'm going to take a minute to kind of show you what I mean by these things. Data sources, and especially when you're talking about data-driven sources that like CDS that are in an environment, they're a lot like containers since they help you to protect, control, and share the data for app usage. So I actually keep several kind of go-to data sources. I have a few entities that are populated with data. I have a couple of SharePoint sites. One is open to all of Microsoft. One is just mine, so I can't, I don't put my demos at risk sometime. This helps me decide how I'm going to share, how I'm going to protect the data. And it helps me also to remember that I need to permission my data. That's a priority with PowerApps because PowerApps is going to respect the data permissions that are on my data source. And I've seen this written as one word and 2. I decided to do 2 today. To really underscore, we're talking about a source for data. We're not talking about any particular data source connection here, right? But having some standards that you use for demos, that you use with your customers, that you can show them kind of, why should I use this data source rather than this one? That's always great to have. And they're like containers again, because they kind of keep things in a boundary that you can use to protect things, to control things, and to share things. Now with environments, I was so sorry that environment doesn't start with D. But the environment, right, that is a place where you can really control, what people can do with the data, especially on CDS level. But you also control data loss prevention there. So it's really great for protecting things. Again, in the real world, the containers are protecting from contamination. They're protecting from bad weather conditions. Same thing here, right? We want our data sources to be clean. We want them to be properly permissioned. We want them to be in environments where the data is going to be safe. It's got DLP policies applied. Think about your environments when you make them, because this is a really important container for your apps, okay? Demos. So demos are a lot like cutting tools to me because they help me to break down powerful features. So we have a lot of features, but if I were to have a presentation where I talked about all those features, I don't know what people would come away with because it's too many, right? So demos are a way that I can take a topic and break down that topic to really show off those powerful features, but in the context of a particular audience. So when you're talking to your customers or you're talking to people, if you're a consultant, you're helping people with PowerApps, you want to kind of get a good idea of what persona they are and then start building demos for that persona. You will find a lot of common denominators. Like, for instance, no matter what company you go to, they're going to have CRM needs. They're going to have document management needs. They're going to have task management needs. They're going to have inspection or auditing needs. Kind of every company has this to some degree. So why don't you just go ahead and make some demos on those typical patterns, have them in your back pocket, and now you've got that EDC with the things you need. And so if somebody were to hit you with a question on, hey, we have a problem with document management or whatever we have a problem with, you can say, hey, I have a demo. Let me show you something. Like right there in that Skype meeting, you could offer to share your screen. And you'd be surprised how often I do that. Let me just show you what I've done in that area that you're talking about. But I kind of have to have some demos in my EDC box ready to pull out like that to really, slice and dice their business needs. Next, I talk about distribution groups. Again, I wish it was the security groups because this is about security groups and security roles. So security groups if you're on the productivity side, security roles if you're CRM, ERP, and you're using like CDS, Dynamics, Salesforce. You got to think about these security roles, right? They are a lot like cordage because they help you to pull together users and maintain that connection even during migrations, right? As well as to fix the problems associated with access control. And what are some of the problems associated with access controls? Well, people move around in a company, right? One week I'm in this team, next week I'm in a different team, or I've moved around in my org. And so how do we make sure that I only see what I'm supposed to see based on what role I'm in today? Well, if I use a security group, that's really helpful because as I drop out of that security group, I will lose access to those apps and those data sources. And so it's a way of, leveraging the Active Directory. Sure, Active Directory security groups can also have timeouts or renewal cycles so that you don't forget to offboard people. When it comes to security roles, it's a priority, I think, in the CRM, ERP space to really set up roles so that people can see and do and work on whatever they need to see, do, and work on. I did a lot of this kind of work with SharePoint because, we often had to, here at Microsoft, I worked in MSIT, we often had to secure sites where you could see certain things and not other things. And then where, we would have to double check access when people migrate to other locations because you might be able to be involved in a process if you are living in America that you may not be able to do and see if you're living in EMEA, because sometimes there's regional constraints, right? So think about tying the right people together, keeping them, leveraging the Active Directory and your identity management tools to group people so that it's easier. And I keep a little OneNote file with all of my distribution groups, right? All of my security groups, my roles and so forth in a single page. I'm going to show you how you can use one of our templates for this purpose to kind of keep track of your groups. And that way, as you build apps, you just keep reusing the same groups as opposed to adding people one at a time, right? Decks. So we call them decks at Microsoft, but I think most people call them PowerPoint. But I got away with calling them decks because that's what we call them internally here at Microsoft. But a deck is similar to combustion in my mind because they fire up passion and excitement for what can be done, and they demonstrate how easy it can be to do it. So I really like having like a set of decks. And I'll show you the decks that I have, kind of give you a peek at the topics that I chose. But think about what decks do you need so that if someone said to you, I need you to speak at the conference or I need you to go talk at a user group, that you'd be like already ready and because you have a deck on that topic. Now, of course, because our product is changing, oh my gosh, rapidly, we're getting better and better, faster than I've ever seen anything grow. You will have to update your decks, right? So minimize the use of screenshots so that you don't have to keep replacing screenshots, and maximize your usage of conceptual graphics. So concepts don't change as much as the UI or the how-to, but the concepts kind of persist. So in your decks, take some time to make graphics or visuals that get the point across as to what you're doing and why it's important in the business world. How does this help solve problems? What are the major features that you want to look for, target, and why? But I love having I actually have a key, a literal key, K-E-Y, that is a USB drive that is on my keychain, and it has 25 decks on it. So even if I didn't have my computer and I'm in a car with somebody and the Uber driver says, well, how do you do that? I'll say to the Uber driver, let's stop over at Starbucks over here. If you've got a laptop or a computer or even a mobile device, I have a way to share this deck with you. So I keep it in my OneDrive as well as on my keychain. These are my handy decks, right? Then we have documentation. And to me, documentation is like cover, right? because you can cover your booty. And what I mean about that, sometimes we're not all deeply technical in every topic for Power Apps, right? It takes a while to kind of have that kind of breadth where you can go deep on any topic, but you can usually cover all those topics. And if they want more information, you whip out of your EDC, you whip out your white paper, or you whip out your docs link. And these are the things you will use to give that audience, after you've given them a brief introduction or you've given them a brief synopsis of the why do you care. Now you whip out your white paper and you say, hey, why don't you review this white paper on your own after we meet, and then you'll reach back out to me with questions. And wow, that saves a lot of time, because a lot of people, especially very technical audiences, they want to read the details. They want to go deep, and I ain't got that time. Usually I ain't got that time. So the white papers really help me, especially fill gaps in my knowledge and also reduce the amount of time I have to spend going over things. Okay. So I want to show you a few examples of each of these. So why don't I do that? I'm going to head over to, I'm going to start. So the first one was, what was the first one? The first one was data sources. So let's go here for a minute. I do happen to have a couple of data sources. So you see this one that's called Audrie's Demos. This is where I kind of dedicated this site for demos. And this is also a site where I do some kind of sometimes I do some testing. The reason is if I run into a bug or I run into a problem with what I'm trying to do, then I can tell my team, hey, I ran into a problem, and the first thing they say is, okay, can you share the app with us? Okay, so that takes time, right? I gotta go figure out who you are, what your alias is, what group you're in, blah, blah, blah. This way, this site is publicly shared at Microsoft. Everybody at Microsoft has access to this site and to this data, every single list, right? And so I can just go ahead and point them to the list. I know in my head, I've already shared that data. I've already shared that environment. I just have to share the app, right? And so if it's a form, I don't even have to do that, because customized forms inherit the site. And so I get this benefit of having share and build all together with customized forms, which I adore. So if they say that, I can just point them to the form. I don't have to do anything. So I also have my own site, right? And this site has my principal OneNote. This is my planning team site, right? So the planning team site does have some demos on it, a lot actually. And the reason why is because this is me. You notice I'm the only member in this site, and that is so on purpose. This is because if I were to put my demos on that other site, it's possible somebody could come in and decide, I'm going to demo here, or I'm going to start using this thing that's Audrey's using, and they'll start deleting my data. Now, I'll have you know, here's a little side point on my demo EDC. I actually put very real looking data in my demos. Like, I don't write the word test one. I actually take the time to write something that looks close to reality. And this is so if I'm talking to a customer or if I'm talking to a person about this demo, they can not only get it from what I'm saying, but they can get it from what they see. Like they could imagine, oh yeah, I'd want to filter by contractor. So this is kind of test data contractor ABC. There's no contractor companies involved, but at least they get, okay, these are different contractors. They can see the schedule cost impacts. That's a typical thing they have to do. So, and I will put in text so they can see, okay, what if I typed this much information? What would this look like? Because if I just had test one, you don't even get an idea of how much information kind of fits in that space. So I actually do kind of scrub my demos so that they have real data. So if I were to share this with everybody, I know somebody would enter in test 1, test 2, test 3, and it would drive me crazy, right? I would still love them madly, but it would drive me crazy. So I have a site where I'm the only member, and this is where I kind of manage my demos. Now, we also use demos.microsoft.com, which all the partners use, and I've used for many years as a Microsoft partner. but there are limits to how long they last, and I can't always renew them. And so since I do invest, I would say 2 to 4 hours in many of my demos that are customer facing. Sometimes I'll invest even like a couple of weeks on a demo just to really pull out every possible scenario that fits them. So I don't want that to disappear in some demo environment or some trial environment one day. So that's my data source story. So I have these data sources in my back pocket. When it comes to CDS, I actually have an entire CDS environment. Now I'll be starting to show you, starting probably next month, I'll start to show you some of my CDS solutions. But I'm still working on them, so I can't show them today to you. But this environment will have several solution packages with lots of different components, like different Canvas apps versus model-driven apps. And so you can see I built this environment with a plan. You don't just build environments for fun. I have a plan for this environment. This is going to be my CDS environment starting next month, where I'll be demoing both flows and apps built with CDS for apps. I'm watching Greg really closely because Greg is going to be doing some videos, so I'm going to be learning from him, and then I'll be doing some practical application to what he's teaching in my environment. So that's another part of demos, having the right environments for your demos so that you can show off all the features. You'll also notice, and I know, again, this doesn't have the CDS in it yet, but if you look at my app list here, if I sort by name, I have a little naming protocol thing that I do. So notice that all my demos start with the word demo. They actually start with the word demo. And this way, I can find them really quickly, no matter how many end up in this environment. Also, all of my template demonstrations actually start with the word template. And with the template demos, which I do a lot of, right? With the template demos, I like to keep an eye on how old the template is, because sometimes we refresh our templates. And so what I'll do is, if it's like 3 months old, I might just double check with Brian or double check with Casey and say, hey, have we upgraded that template, in case I haven't noticed change. Or I might just make a new one and replace this one if I haven't customized it, right? Because I want to make sure I have the most recent template. But you can see I can find all my template demos really quickly. I will usually do the first template demo, just click on the template and actually build it. But then as I start showing them others, that can be kind of a time eater. So I will have some prepared. Like for instance, this is what I wanted to, as I go to the next topic, which is the distribution groups. In the distribution groups, one template that I really love for that is the onboarding template. Now with the onboarding template, you can actually, and you can see I actually dated this one because I know we're getting some upgrades in that template. But you can actually configure in the template for people joining your team. You can configure all of the security groups that they need to add themselves to. And this is something I've actually been working with Janice, who's one of our admins. Janice is amazing. She's doing some really awesome stuff for internal admin use, and she's leveraging some of our templates as well. But we had a really long conversation about, when you join the PowerApps team, you actually have to join up into a bunch of security groups. And I bet you that's true in your company too, right? You have to kind of join these security groups. I'm just going to quick pass this and hope I can get faster, right? So you can see there's a to-do list in here, and you can actually click on and add, okay, here's what you need to do when you join the company. I really love this template. And it helps you keep track of how you are doing with each one of these tasks. But the security group progress, like kind of getting signed up and all of those, and some identity management tools like here at Microsoft, you can actually configure a URL that you click on and that joins them to the group. So you think about things like that. But yeah, that gets you started kind of letting people know about the important security groups, like have it included in your onboarding documents or your onboarding app, whatever you're using for that. I wanted to go into the distribution groups also and just remind you, keep some type of list. Many companies, many teams, they'll have a SharePoint site where they post all the security groups and all the distribution groups that you kind of need to join. As you start using model driven, you really want to start documenting how you've done your security group. So document it somewhere, keep it accessible on a SharePoint site or somewhere so that people can refer to how security has been configured. I think also documenting it really helps you think it out. Like, oh, did we think about X? Did we think about Y? And then when you document your security, it's also very easy to troubleshoot it. And I know everybody hates documentation, but everybody also hates having 10 to 12 hours of troubleshooting to figure out why somebody can't get to something. That's worse than the time it might take to document your security. And documenting your security can be as easy as screenshotting the security role and what's circled and what's not circled, so that you remember how it was set up. But I suggest you add some comments on that as to say why, right? And then distribute that list of security groups so that your team can see it and use it and be able to slice and dice the way they share information, the way they give permissions to people, because that's the cutting tool, right? That's the ability to kind of like, let's process what we have to do, but we really can't process everyday work if we don't have an idea of how stuff is secured, right? So I really think, and you need multiple sizes of knives. You need small groups, sometimes you'll need nested groups. You'll need very simple, tiny knives that you'll put on your keychain that maybe just have 5 people in that group. You'll need all these different size knives to really cut up your situation so that you can share and enable people to work with the data you have provided for them, right? Okay, decks. So I really shouldn't go too deeply into my OneDrive. I probably could accidentally expose something, but I have an enormous amount of decks in my PowerApps folder. So there's 20 in there. There's also one for each kind of category of activity. For EBC, I have my EBC deck, and I always keep my EBC deck, which is like enterprise. It's whenever we have an executive briefing where other people come from outside. So we all use the same decks. So I keep the most recent deck in there. I keep decks based on topics. And again, I'm afraid to spend too much time showing you my OneDrive because it could be confidential. But think of using your OneDrive for Business to create folders under the topic of presentations or under the topic of PowerApps. Maybe you have 2 folders, one for PowerApps, one for Flow, and you fill it up with decks. Now, I'm going to show you how I decided what decks I was going to use. So I got in a habit of kind of seeing what people want to know about. And so I started asking, user group leads and different things like that to kind of give me an idea of what people want to talk about. And so I ended up with this speaker request form, right, where people could come to me and ask for speakers for their event, right? It's not always me, right? But then I made an ongoing list, and I keep adding to this list of topics that are typical that people want to talk about. And then I just made a little backlog for myself, and I keep building the deck that goes with each topic. So that basically if they call me and they say, you need to come speak about this, I have got a deck. So I think there's only 3 that I haven't done here out of all of these. I think I haven't done design best practices because I'm going to get help from like Veronica and stuff. But, think about, you might do some collaborations to get the topics you need or the decks that you need. You might even, if you're a champion or you're leading a user group in your area, you might want to create an online place where people can go and pick up decks that are tagged by particular topics if you're willing to do that. So This kind of thing is extremely helpful to have in your PowerApps EDC, because if somebody asks you to do a presentation on the fly, ad hoc, maybe you even get somewhere where you were supposed to talk about X, but then you find out that somebody else was also scheduled to talk about X. That has happened to me, right? Where there's been a mistake and two people are supposed to talk about the same thing. Not since I've been at Microsoft, but before Microsoft, right? And so I have to be ready to do something else, right? Okay. Yeah, so we can't do that thing you prepared 2 weeks in a row. So go ahead and let's do something new. And so I'll just pull one of these decks out of my pocket and off I go. So, excuse me. That's a good habit to have, which leads me to documentation. Now, when it comes to documentation, I actually love two things. I love OneNote and I love docs.microsoft.com. So docs.microsoft.com is awesome. Like one of my favorite, my favorite links on docs.microsoft.com is docs.microsoft.com/connectors, plural, / the name of the connector. Keep that URL in your mind. You can get to the docs on any connector, starting with docs.microsoft.com. Let's see, maybe I should write it for you. docs.microsoft.com / connectors. And then right after that next slash, put the name of the connector. Just try to remember what it is, right? And it will take you to that page. Now, let's say you forget, which is all the docs about that connector. If you forget that URL, just back up to the S in connectors and hit enter. And it will take you to the full list. And let me just show you what this looks like. So we'll go back to our browser. We'll paste in here. And you'll see, look at all the connectors here. They're all fully documented and you can refer to them as you're trying them out, right? To that point, you know, that is something that I do on an ongoing basis. It goes into my connector research area where I literally go through each connector and do my own kind of testing on it. And then if I catch anything that I don't understand or I think might be a gap or a bug, then I'll log it in my gap and bugs page, which I'm not going to show you, but my gaps and bug page has all my questions for, you know, how can we improve these connectors, or is this an expected result or not? And then I kind of check them off when I'm done. I have different kinds of checks just because the app changed. We got an upgrade on tagging. But notice that I also grouped the connectors, right? So I grouped them in little buckets, and kind of when you think about an EDC, when you're filling your EDC sack, you group everything. Like you'll put your combustion on the right, you'll put your flashlight on the left. You'll start grouping things based on lighting, based on fire, based on whatever it is, communications. You might have a pen and pen together with a compass or something, but you put this stuff together in groups. Do this when you're studying your connectors and kind of go through your connectors and try them out and take notes. And whatever feedback you want to give, you don't have to use the OneNote like I do. You could actually go right straight out to our Ideas forum, or you could go to our forums and just put your information in. I think we have. So if you go out to the community, I believe, let's go back to PowerApps. So PowerApps@Microsoft.com. And then I go to community here. I think we have a forum. Just want to look and see here. We have a forum dedicated for common data services as a connector. I guess that's the only connector we call out, which means that all the other connections, you can go ahead and post things about that in general discussion. And if you believe we should have a separate forum for the SharePoint connector or the Project Online connector, if you think that's a big enough topic, you know, let me know, and I might actually call out different forums for those different connectors so that you guys can communitize the conversation on that connector. And again, documentation is cover, right? It's cover so that you don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out something somebody's already figured out already. It's cover in the sense that, you know, you're giving people more information that you might have handy in your head. you're saving time. It's cover in that it protects you from the storm of questions, because a lot of times the questions are already answered here, right? And so when we have people who mark solutions on PowerApps Forum, I love that, because we reuse those solutions. And actually, Rob is paying attention to them every day and collecting trends, right? And when we start seeing trends in questions and solutions, then we feed that information back to the engineering team, and they see what they can do to make life better. So life better, having cover, is all about our 5D, okay? So just going to go back here and try to get back into my deck if I can. So that was show and tell. In part of documents, you want to think about white papers and utilities. So we have white papers, which are documents that our PowerApps team, our customer success team have written, or sometimes our premier support teams will get involved in writing amazing docs. You can find those docs in docs.microsoft.com. There'll be a link to them so that you can download them, right? And so I've put some links here on the screen. I will post this deck in the community as well with this video. And so that you can click on the links and they'll work. But these are pages that you will have white papers on. And I suggest, if you're in the category of knowing about monitoring, admin, advanced administration, for instance, you need to look at the different white papers we have. So we have some white papers on a few topics. We even have a best practices white paper that Pat worked on. I'll put the link for that in here because I forgot about it. But every time you see a white paper, then this is your documentation of your EDC. You need to have those handy, right? So you might want to build yourself a list of links that are accessible from your phone, or you can download them and just keep them like I do. I keep these on my key as well. I have to remember, though, if I download them, they might get updated between the time I download them and pull them back up. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on when the teams are updating these docs. And if I find that I get behind, then I can always go straight to the links, right? So that's the sources. So remember this, please. 5 Ds for your everyday carry to be a successful and productive PowerApps mentor and app maker. You need your data sources thought out, your environments thought out, because those are your containers. They help you to protect, control, and share data. You need a set of demos that you can cut those features, break them down, process them for the audience that you're talking to at any given time. You need to have some distribution groups, some security groups and security roles to tie people together. This also helps you easily migrate things and fix those annoyances related to access control. You need decks. You need something that you can have handy in your back pocket. If somebody needs you to talk about something, you got that ready, right? And you can fire them up, because, you know, decks fire up. They create excitement. That's our combustion, right? And so that's where your energy is going to be. So if you prepare your decks in advance and you kind of have the top 5 topics at a very minimum in your tool belt, then you can focus on the energy that you need to really get people to understand and get excited about the things that are in your deck. I think somebody asked me once, you know, how do you become a good speaker? And my favorite answer to that question, because there's like a ton, I love one of my coworkers who I deeply respect, Chuck Sterling, is probably the most amazing at teaching speaking skills and being a good speaker. My manager's manager, Ryan Cunningham, is also an amazing speaker. They're people I look up to and I go, wow, these people can speak, right? And so they would answer this question differently, but here's my favorite answer to this question, and I think it's at the root of my personal ability to speak, is that I focus on the value that I'm going to give to the audience, right? Instead of thinking about me and what I did, what I know how to do, what I don't know how to do, I try to pick 3 things that I can talk about in any given presentation that someone can take away. And all through my presentation, I'm thinking, who am I helping, right? I'm thinking about each person I'm looking at in the audience, and I'm assuming that I'm going to be able to help at least a third or a quarter, the very least the eighth of that audience. But somebody's going to walk away helped. And just the excitement of being able to help people or make their lives better kind of takes the focus off of myself. And so I stop worrying about how I look. I prepare in advance to look as best as I can, but sometimes we have issues about our appearance, and, no matter how much time we spend trying to look good, we might not feel happy with the way we look or the way we sound, but we need to take the focus off of ourselves and put it on the people receiving the information. And then documentation is a lot like cover, because you can cover your booty. You can provide that additional information that you might not keep in your head, you might not have a deck for. That very technical person wants to go deep. Have your white papers ready. If you need help from the product team on getting technical documentation, don't hesitate to reach out to us, right? But there's a bunch of links that you can go to and pull down our white papers and pull down our best practices. And each data source, don't forget that your data sources have their own documentation. So it's not always, you don't have to always rely on the PowerApps site to give you good best practices and data source recommendations. You can go to the source, because the horse's mouth. Like, if you're looking for a best way to secure SQL, go ahead and visit the SQL site, right? Or the best way to secure Dynamics finance and operations, go there. You'd be surprised how much content is at the source, right? But keep track of where the good documentation is and where the good questions are, and you're going to have that everyday carry in your pocket, or in your USB drive, or in your OneDrive, in the cloud somewhere, that you're going to be ready for whatever, whenever. So there's your survival kit. I hope that you stay safe and secure, whether it's a survival kit EDC for the real world or a survival ETC for software like PowerApps. Whichever EDC type it is, stay safe, stay dry, stay happy. And I'll be talking to you soon.